Music leaks have been rampant in the music industry ever since it became a monetized art form. In fact, accounts of illegal sharing of music date way back to even the 1700s when Mozart recreated sheet music from memory that was the property of the Vatican. Now, digital music leaks launched in the early 2000s with the popularization of the internet that allowed people to connect with one another online in a faster and more efficient manner. Initially, music files were only shared via email and hard drives at a small scale due to the data limitations at the time. But soon, file sharing platforms like MySpace, Napster, and LimeWire emerged, multiplying the number of tracks shared across the web by the day. All music listeners had to do was purchase an album or single on iTunes, download the track to their computer, and then simply upload the music to one of these websites for the rest of the world to listen for free with little to no security concerns. Ultimately, this was coined peer-to-peer sharing. Obviously, as the internet has continued to develop, the process of leaking music has followed suit. In the process, birthing an entire black market of its own for leakers to actually profit from their services now with the use of group buys or private sales, some tracks of which even selling for upwards of tens of thousands of dollars depending on their rarity. But with so much revenue being essentially stolen from what artists and labels would have generated selling music to their fans directly, the consequences have too, which leads us to the three main questions. Why exactly are music leaks so illegal? How do leakers actually get their hands on the music? And who exactly is behind them? Noah Michael Urban, also known by aliases such as Sosa, Elijah, Anthony Ramirez, and more famously, King Bob, hailing from Florida, catapulted into infamy for his involvement in leaking music and insider information about opium artists' music, lyrics, release dates on Twitter, even publicly beefing with one of Playboi Carti's best friends and creative directors, Joy Division. However, his rise to fame and notoriety was also likely the reason for his downfall, as his career of sorts was abruptly halted when he was arrested a few months ago on January 11th, 2024, while he awaits the verdict in jail to this day. He accumulated a total of at least 14 charges, including 8 counts of wire fraud, in which he stole over $800,000 in cryptocurrency, 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and 5 counts of aggravated identity theft. Jail logs even showed that he allegedly attempted to flee Florida to evade the charges, tacking on an additional charge of fugitive from justice. But one of the primary methods King Bob employed to carry out his fraudulent activities was the SIM swap technique. This elaborate scheme involves impersonating identities with telecommunication companies to gain access to victims' phones and therefore all of the accounts they are currently logged into on that phone. Furthermore, he could then bypass two-factor authentication, allowing him to intercept one-time passwords to finally infiltrate personal bank accounts, Coinbase wallets, emails, text messages, and the list goes on. It is also said that King Bob utilized this technique to acquire music among other information. However, this is less traceable due to the lack of a money trail. Additionally, it is rumored that he would acquire large sums of funds from crypto victims and essentially launder the money by paying for unreleased music and flip it for a profit with somewhat cleaned money. Meanwhile, he never really invested any of his own money whatsoever. Unfortunately though, the money wasn't clean enough, for the FBI meticulously built their case against him by tracing his online footprint across all his aliases. But I can only imagine his most notable alias, King Bob, was at the forefront of the sting. As he still awaits trial, if convicted on all charges, he faces up to 170 years behind bars, or more than a lifetime. 20 years per wire fraud charge for a total of 160 years behind bars, plus 2 years in prison per charge of aggravated identity theft for a total of another additional 10 years. But King Bob allegedly had a trick up his sleeve, for when police issued a search warrant on March 1st to gather evidence from his computer, he had run software on his computer that would erase everything. While we await the trial, it is not clear what exactly, if anything, the FBI was able to confiscate from his computer, but regardless, it seemed King Bob was onto them as well, and perhaps was successful in clearing his name and all of the associated evidence before being detained. Prior to King Bob's reign though, was Adrian Kwiatkowski, more famously known by his online alias Spur, who emerged as a central figure in the realm of music leaks, particularly within the communities of rap and pop artists like Lil Uzi Vert and Frank Ocean, who at the time infrequently released music. However, at the tender age of 23, Kwiatkowski found himself embroiled in a web of charges that ultimately led to his arrest on August 27, 2023, where he pled guilty to 14 copyright offenses, 3 counts of computer misuse, and 3 offenses under the Proceeds of Crime Act, subsequently landing him a sentence of 18 months in prison. Leveraging techniques such as phishing and social engineering, he infiltrated the cloud-based accounts of artists, producers, and record label executives, persuading them to unwittingly hand over access to unreleased music by, similar to SIM swapping, impersonating targeting an unauthorized individual to request music and/or related files. Another popular technique he employed consists of sending fraudulent password notifications and/or reset links to the desired victim to trigger him or her to urgently click the false link owned by the hacker and input their login information, essentially giving the hacker access to the accounts, and then download files and proceed to sell in black market group and private buys. In just a few years, Spur was reportedly able to amass over 130,000 pounds from unauthorized selling of copyrighted music, at least that the agents could track down. Because the unraveling of Spur's operation actually began with a joint investigation by the UK's City of London Police and New York's Manhattan District Attorney's Office over 3 years prior to his arrest in September 2009. The police departments were inundated with complaints from various record labels on behalf of musicians, with which authorities were able to discover a trail of hacked accounts and subsequent publicly sold unreleased music recordings online, one of which leading the officials straight to Spur's doorstep, because upon a report from specifically Frank Ocean's representatives alleging unauthorized access and downloading of his files from his producer's Dropbox, investigators were able to link the email addresses that the files were sent to Spur's home IP address in the UK. And upon exercising a search warrant, police found a physical hard drive containing a document summarizing the exact methods he used to obtain all the stolen music, as well as the key to all his stashed Bitcoin accounts where he stored the proceeds from leaked music sales. And if that wasn't already hard enough evidence to evade, 6 other devices, including a collection of 1,263 songs by 89 different artists, were also confiscated from his home. Some of the most notable tracks and artists being Sway Lee's OG version of Sunflower, countless Kanye West songs, a myriad of tracks from Post Malone, Nav, Wiz Khalifa, Cordae, Party Next Door, Pusha T, Lil Uzi Vert, Ed Sheeran, and the list goes on. Probably worth additional millions of dollars in total. And unfortunately for him, all of said evidence was seized to never be returned. Unexpectedly, Spur opted to plead guilty to all these charges, admitting to his online alter ego and confessing to the theft and subsequent sale of copyrighted material for cryptocurrency. One of the few times music leakers were actually arrested for theft and sale of musical compositions. Similar to King Bob, Garrett Endicott, a 22-year-old Missouri man known online as Soda Cup, a prominent leaker in the Playboy Cardi, Gunna, and Young Thug communities, also found himself entangled in a multi-million-dollar SIM swapping conspiracy. Except his situation was much more convoluted in that it involved disloyalty. No one really knows to this day who the mole was, or rather, how the authorities caught onto their trail. His journey into infamy began in December 2021, when he was identified as the 6th member of an international hacking ring, ominously known as the Community. Their technique involved a much more complex strategy and multi-year operation, whereby they continuously targeted vulnerable victims' phone numbers in the United States, including California, Missouri, Michigan, Utah, Texas, New York, and Illinois, to subsequently act as a gateway to access all of their other online accounts, including email, cloud storage, and most lucratively, cryptocurrency exchange accounts. Over the years, their scheme reportedly looted tens of millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency from their victims, with sums ranging as small as $2,000 to over $5 million per account. But one by one, each member of the Community was taken into custody for some odd reason. Soda Cup, in particular, eventually pled guilty to multiple counts of identity and cryptocurrency theft, where he admitted to participating in a sophisticated SIM swap operation orchestrated with and by his hacking group. He was sentenced to a mere 10 months in prison in order to pay $120,000 in restitution to his victims. And while this may seem like a large amount, this paled in comparison to his co-conspirators, such as Ricky Hanschmumacher, 48 months in prison, over $7.6 million in restitution. Colton Jurisic, 42 months in prison, over $9.5 million in restitution. Rayad Ghaffar Abbas, 24 months in prison, over $310,000 in restitution. And Connor Freeman was sentenced to 3 years in prison and an undisclosed sum in monetary restitution. The glaring discrepancy in sentencing suggests that Endicott may have played a less prominent role in the conspiracy, or perhaps cooperated with authorities, leading to a more lenient punishment. Other speculation accounts that he may have been snitched on by his fellow members, leading to his arrest. However, However, we must also remember that there is a possibility of no foul play at all, considering that with more arrests comes more evidence that could link conversations and accounts to any and everyone involved, and therefore stronger cases against the hackers. After all, he did plead guilty to all the charges. And last but certainly not least, out of the infamous music leak mafia, Lucky 4K, a prominent Juice WRLD leaker and or buyer that would famously subsidize many of the outrageous price tags on Juice's group buys with cryptocurrency he obtained from, let's say, unknown sources. And although his favorite artist was an emo rapper, his life was definitely far from depressing. For this story of a Hamilton, Canada resident whose name was redacted from court proceedings due to being a minor will actually go down in history, as police say it was the largest hack of a single individual's financial account ever. Lucky 4K supposedly walked away with $48 million in cryptocurrency from a US entrepreneur in yet another SIM swap attack. The victim in this case was Mr. Jones, an early investor in Bitcoin, meaning he was a huge target for any hacker, knowing he likely picked up an ungodly amount of the currency when it was worth dollars, pennies, or even potentially less. And given he was a so-called Bitcoin pioneer, you would think he would have a handle on the security of his wallet. But somehow, with one SIM swap attack on Mr. Jones' T-Mobile phone network, Lucky was able to break into his email and furthermore gain full access into his crypto wallet on blockchain.com worth tens of millions. Maybe Mr. Jones was a passive investor and just hadn't checked his crypto wallet in a while. Or perhaps he was aware of the true strength of Bitcoin, its ability to track down every last transaction if you try hard enough. Because Lucky was eventually identified as the perpetrator of the stolen funds when he allegedly used the very same cryptocurrency to buy a rare username on the PlayStation network God that he subsequently connected to his home Wi-Fi network, allowing investigators to locate his IP address. Yet, despite the gravity of the offense and being caught in the act, all he was successfully charged with was pleading guilty for one count of theft over $5,000. What's even crazier is that Lucky's name really lives up to its definition, and that after being held in custody, he also spent no further time in jail, partly due to the year he had already spent locked up. Not to mention, the only sentence he really received was that he was banned from handling digital assets, aka cryptocurrencies, for a year, effectively serving a probationary period. But with the relatively anonymous nature of cryptocurrency and the dark web, it's practically impossible to enforce such a sentence. So basically, he stole all that money and got off scot-free. According to the court, central to this decision of an ease of punishment was the recognition of the teen's struggles with anxiety and other mental health issues, which had reportedly led to his dropping out of traditional schooling. They also gave him opportunities for redemption, as the defense lawyer revealed the teenager's aspirations to complete high school and pursue a career in cybersecurity, but on the right side of history this time. But if you were to ask me, he just had a good lawyer that made light of the situation. One thing his lawyer used was evidence of an undeserving, dynamic, and aggressive arrest after police kicked in the teen's door, allegedly causing the memory of that night to burn into teen's mind and has been the cause of some post-event stress. If I were him, the only thing I'd be stressed about is what color Lambo truck I want with the rest of that $48 million. But what about the victim's restitution? Are they gonna let Lucky off without paying that too? At the time, Lucky only had to cough up about 94 Bitcoins, worth roughly $2.5 million. Back to Mr. Jones out of the $48 million. I guess the rest of the money was already spent on Juice WRLD leaks and couldn't even be found or recovered. Or, if he was smart, stashed away somewhere anonymously. One could say he got pretty lucky. But to be honest, when it comes to the actual crime of intellectual property theft or theft of copyrighted material such as music, there's not much need to really be lucky, considering it's not very enforced. We shed light on some of the most prominent leakers that were caught, at least, in our time in this video, and only one was actually arrested for stealing music. Instead, the government seems to be more worried about taking down hackers, stealing actual currencies with tangible value rather than recordings with perceived value or potential sales by record labels, which makes sense considering it's likely a less damaging crime to society and its citizens. But one thing is for certain though, the downfall of these individuals often stemmed from their own greed and hunger for clout. Had they remained in the shadows, avoiding social media followers and PlayStation notoriety, who knows if they would have been caught. The biggest profiteers may still be raking in the dough from all the music leaks as of late, and because they maintain their anonymity, they roam the internet free. But y'all let me know in the comments what you think about all of these situations with the music leak mafia. Is what they did worth it with all the money that was involved? Or are your morals just too strong?